What are my priorities? Well, right now, as you look at the autumn series, I don't think England are ranked in the top 3 in any one particular facet of the game. So there's plenty of things we've got to work upon. There's plenty of things we've got to get right. The thing that keeps resonating in my head, it's actually, I'm going to go back to when I was a player, and it is when the team was coached by Clive Woodward. And actually the thing that always sticks in my head was in every single meeting, he had these posters on the wall. And I was 20, 21. And on that first poster, the poster he always referred to in every meeting was brilliant basics. And he said, you've got to be brilliant at basics, every meeting. So we've got a lot of work to do, but first and foremost, what we've got to do as part of that, we've got to be brilliant at the basics. Come that first game in 47 days' time.
England Rugby. This is a team that has been well documented on this channel, but in my opinion, the need has never been greater than right now. Those of you who have watched my videos before, namely the New England Way video released in the Six Nations of 2024, will know that I am as excited about this team as I have ever been about an England team. And I truly believe that they are destined for great things. This belief is rooted in their back-to-basics approach, which under Steve Borthwick they went back to the ironclad fundamentals of Test match rugby. As shown in the New England Way, this meant doubling down on the foundations of their game, that being the defensive system and their set piece, to elevate those areas of the game. These areas of the game, in combination with the kicking game that was developed under Wigglesworth, are still to this day critical to the success and optimism that is building around England at the moment. This video is made to demonstrate the foundations of England's game. However, we mentioned that the attack will come. Now, at the opening round of the 25 Six Nations, England opened their innings with a loss to Ireland. Now, Wigglesworth wouldn't have actually been that unhappy about this. Sure, England lost, but what he would have been very happy about is that they were still getting into shape right until the final minute. It is very easy to forget or even ignore this progress in light of losses. However, England was still getting into their shapes and running overload here, which we will discuss later, to score a try in the 76th minute by Tom Curry. Over the tournament, the attack progressed to what was undisputedly the peak of the Six Nations, which was of course the 10-try demolition of Wales in the final round. Now, what is really critical to note is that this was merely a continuation of Ireland. It's a continuation of the same processes, patterns, shapes and structures used against Ireland and in all their prior games. This was simply the same principles and patterns executed to the highest level as they'd improved throughout the tournament. However, one thing that we have to note is that whilst this was impressive, it wasn't as impressive as what we saw in the summer. The Argentina tour was like Valley Forge for the England team. The insertion of Lee Blackett aside, everything that England were doing in this tour, be it their defence, their kicking game, their attack, with a second string team, just elevated. It showed a renewed focus on line speed, their attack starting to purr, just the alignments, timings and handling starting to really click, and namely, it showed a lot about the team's potential. The more I watched that tour, the more I analysed it, the more excited and progressively more exhilarated I got at what England were doing. We saw the same shapes, the same patterns, the same principles that we saw in the Six Nations, albeit with a little bit of Lee Blackett tweaking. But in attack, we saw England's mindset to go to space, to back their skill sets, to take risks and take the defence on. Their lines, their alignments, their handling under pressure and support play was sublime, and in addition to this, the defence had also come on leaps and bounds as well. Under Byron McGuigan, England's defensive system has shifted back to a modified version of the Stormer-style Springboks defence with that out-to-win blitz. This is the same system coached by Felix Jones, and returning to even a modified version of it yielded brilliant results. Against this system, Argentina conceded 6 turnovers before the 27th minute. Now we know what turnovers and knock-ons often result in, and my God has this part of our game escalated. England's scrum has been magnificent, with our second string team demolishing the Argentine scrum at times. Either by being squeaky clean when the opposition weren't, or through sheer dominance, England's scrum has become a pen machine for them. Add in the new talents like Pepper, Atkinson, the Jomo etc. The roadmap for England Rugby is looking exceptionally rosy and Steve will be very happy. This neglects to mention the maturing of Wigglesworth attacking systems. The combination of this with Andrew Strawbridge's skill sets and the insertion of Lee Blackett have led to some absolutely scintillating rugby, where, in my opinion, if the England team here were wearing black shirts, they wouldn't really look out of place. All of these things combined together really gives you an optimistic view of rugby. Currently, when thinking about England, I feel like Homer Simpson laying in on Sunday morning missing church, or Sharpie turning down the French girl and feeling really smug about it. You see, I truly believe if England can continue this development and get their Lions back, they can repeat England's sole World Cup win by winning the 2027 World Cup. Now, if you're an England fan, you may be thinking, okay, Wibble, what you on? And if you're a fan of another team that isn't England, you may be having a slightly different reaction to this. Now, I admit, I could be completely wrong about the World Cup prediction, but where I'm not wrong is that England are about to become a very good team and arguably enter a golden age. The way they're doing this is going back to English or winning rugby. The Daily Telegraph is the best rugby journalism for me in the world, bar none. And as we can see England's scrum statistics in the latter part of the Eddie Jones era. As can be seen, an 85% scrum success is pretty horrific for a team who pride their set piece like England. This was one of the first things that Borthwick wanted to fix, and as we saw, the introduction of Tom Harrison has been revolutionary for England's scrum development. Have a listen to this drill and what Tom is calling the state that they're in.
There we go! Living in the abyss! So much!
England's scrum is now a feared weapon. It's a feared weapon because the England forwards train for it to be a weapon. Harrison will run 10-man versus 8-man scrums for extra pressure. The scrum sessions can involve 6 or 7-man scrums, different combinations, and are also at the end of the session to test excellence under fatigue. They call this state the abyss. It's where they train to make it a weapon, but they'll also be training their binds, their timing, their feel and alignment, but really, it's training their mindset.
Everyone says, teams who play against England, they find a bit extra. Actually, there's nastiness to us.
Steve Borthwick has always wanted what Clive Woodward had in '03, an angry, nasty, dominant English pack. This is the pack which England had in '03, a pack described by the Kiwis as nightmarish, battle-hardened Vikings with all scars, snarls and snorts. At one point, defending an 8-man scrum with 6 men, they were referred to as monoliths who intimidated and unsettled, and that is exactly what they were. Steve, with a focus on the set piece, is trying to recreate this pack, and with the mindset shift, change in training and mentality, it has yielded some incredible results. With stats sourced by OptaJohnny, we can see England won 30% of their scrums via penalty, nearly 10% more than second-placed Wales. In terms of scrum success, they also topped the charts at 96.7%. This is only one part of why I think England are about to become a very scary team. And as such, this is only part 1 of a 3-part series of videos about England. This series breaks down exactly why I think England are so dangerous right now. Not only in attack, but their kicking game, their scrummaging, and their whole game plan, which is really what we're talking about. It's a absolutely huge subject. Now, whilst I believe that England have a chance of the World Cup, it has been noted by other coaches that England are on the rise. Not necessarily the World Cup, but definitely on the rise. In this interview taken from Devlin Sports Podcast, they're discussing South Africa, and look what comes out unprompted by Steve with some trepidous facial expressions.
So, you've got to front up. It doesn't matter who you play anyway in a test match. You've got to front up with numbers 1 to 8 and be prepared to be physical, and your backs have to be against South Africa as well. So, and the All Blacks are more than capable of doing that, and as are many other teams.
In terms of that,
I really like the look of England.
Okay.
England are starting to put a really good squad. You look at what they've got in the Lions and the recent series against Argentina. They played really well against Argentina and are building quite a bit of depth there. So I think they'll be hard to beat going forward.
This is huge. This, from a 2-time World Cup winning coach, is absolutely huge. Unpromptingly singling out Borthwick's England and noting their performance in Argentina is probably one of the best compliments England could have received from Steve Hansen. The choice of language used by Hansen about this team on Argentina was pretty indicative as well. He called them hard to beat. Now, hard to beat is the term that he used for his own World Cup winning 2015 All Blacks team. It is probably one of the highest vindications that Steve Borthwick could have received. Taking England back to basics and then building onto their game plan, building the 03 strengths of set piece, defence and kicking. And then when ready and when done, building an attack on top of this. An attack run by the Saints and heavily influenced by Sam Vesti's Northampton Saints themselves. The Saints structures have been taken on board by Wigglesworth and implemented into this England team. They've proven so successful that even though Lee Blackett is currently incoming to take over attack coach, he had to show whilst on tour that he was able to continue the development of the attack along the lines, the manner and the style already built by Richard Wigglesworth. Now, in reality, this was never going to be a problem. Blackett himself is an exceptional attack coach, and he himself uses very similar structures at Bath to that which are used by Northampton Saints and England. This means that Blackett can slot in fairly seamlessly. Now, we've talked enough about an intro. It's time now to get into it. It's time to show you what Steve Hansen saw in England in the Argentina series. It's time to show you the attacking principles and structures laid out by Wigglesworth, his absolutely next level genius plays in terms of the aerial kicking game. But first, we need to talk about the Northampton influences on this team. So, it's a long one again, so grab a cup of tea, sit back and hopefully enjoy it. Now, one thing that both Borthwick and Wigglesworth will never compromise on is brilliant basics. As we've discussed in the New England Way, which was released in the 24 Six Nations, England's game plan is non-negotiable. At least the fundamentals of playing in the right areas of the field, territory, set-piece, defence, kicking game, etc, etc. This is still fundamental to England's success, and as we can see here, the introduction of Byron McGuigan and his line speed defence is critical to how England want to progress and continue their game. As we know, the line speed defence is inherently tied to turnovers and scrummaging, because England want to put skill sets under pressure, forcing knock-ons which in turn give them opportunities to use their scrum, now a super strength. Their line speed defence has forced a knock-on, meaning England get their scrum, and we know they're getting very good at these, and this is proven with England forcing a penalty. This strategy allows them to clear their lines and get upfield, and is what England call bolt rugby. So named after thunderbolts raining down from the sky that the opposition have to defuse from England's exceptional kicking game. With England's average regain rate of 30%, however, it's very hard to defuse this for long. Since 2024, though, England have shifted away from doing this religiously, and whilst they still follow the principles, it's not as strict as they are developing their attack. This was implied by Steve in an interview referencing the 2025 Six Nations game versus Scotland.
We had a game in round 3 where it was a game that was difficult against a different tactical challenge against Scotland, who did very, very well. And we took lessons from it. The team found a way to win in that game, despite not playing exactly how we wanted to, and then have evolved and challenged themselves since that point in time. So I'm delighted that the players continue to work on the process of being better.
Whilst this is a huge oversimplification, there are two main ways that England play. The first being bolt rugby, and the second being total rugby. Now, bolt rugby, as we know, is the kick-heavy, territory, set-piece defensive pressure game that we have discussed and England used in 2023 during the World Cup and in the early stages of 2024. It prizes territory and getting upfield, because if you are Australia in this case, if the possession ends here, you physically cannot score points. You're too far from the post, you cannot kick, you cannot score points. In fact, if you try to run it out, you're often likelier to concede points as the opposition know you won't kick, they load 14 men in the line, pressure you, and force the turnover penalty, or even intercept to score points. Now, contrastingly, if you're South Africa in this case, you can actually score points even though you haven't got possession, simply because if your defence is good, you're good at forcing turnovers, you're good at forcing knock-ons, you can force errors, and those errors can result in tries or penalty points. Here, South Africa force a jackal penalty 1, and because they're playing down the opposite side of the field and they're in range of the sticks, they can kick the points. Now, for all the beauties of total rugby, Steve is making sure he is coaching them to make sure they do not go away from the brilliant basics or the fundamentals of their game. You see, when teams are running riot and finding space, it's very easy to be seduced to go away from the basics of your game. A recent example of this was the Wallabies' first test against the Springboks in the Rugby Championship 2025, where they won 38-22, where they were trailing 22 points at one stage. However, they were able to make use of the Springboks overplaying, getting counters and interceptions where they really shouldn't have, and using the same targets that they used against the British and Irish Lions. Their scrum and defence was awesome, and their ability off bridge passes and turnovers was lethal, striking targets they'd used against the Lions to great effect. This, of course, resulted in a famous win, and vindication of the Wallabies coaching under Joe Schmidt. However, as good as this was, and I must confess it was good, they were assisted. They were assisted, and Rassie Erasmus really broke down on how they were assisted.
Yeah, look, Grant had so many breaks where he just almost got away, and Mane had so many breaks where he almost got away. You know, the same with Edwell, and that changes games. But then you also have to realize somewhere in the game we're quite not getting it. So then you must don't. Well, I'm not saying that this is the answer, but I think their kick to ruck ratio was. I think we only kicked, 9 kicks in the second half, where their kick to ruck ratio was really turning us around. And I guess the players on the day felt, look, we're 22-0 up and there's lots of space, let's take a chance. And that's coaching, that's us, you know, telling the guys, let's still build the innings. You know, 22-0 is not winning a game. It's actually losing a game at the end by almost 20 points. So there's a lot, I wouldn't want to say learnings, because I know you guys get frustrated when you say learnings. But it was a bad loss. In a bad way, not against a bad team, but and we didn't have fight right till the end, and that's not what we want to give South Africa. You know, we there was a stage where I felt our heads were dropping and our shoulders were slumping, and that was part of the disappointment. But we had a quick chat now there, and everybody's very disappointed. That won't change anything in how you guys see the game and how the supporters will feel. But tactically, yes, we totally overplayed. Every single time we thought something was on, and then the intercept pass or knock on. So, yeah, 100% right.
This is the vindication for Bolt Rugby in the modern game. You can be leading by 3 tries, but if you forget your fundamentals of territory and defence, you start to overplay and it's wet, you offer opportunities for turnover attack. The Wallabies were able to employ this against the British and Irish Lions and South Africa, and it's one of the key lessons under Steve. You can never forget the fundamentals in this England team. This is doubly impressive if you consider the average age of the England squad. It's about trying to impart wise heads on young shoulders. You see, England kick constantly when they're in their own half. It doesn't matter whether it's a box kick, whether it's a kick off 10 as an exit strategy, they kick. Now, I will admit that they will have more of a go nowadays if it's on, but the key thing is playing in the right areas of the field, because if they can regain the ball, they've made 30 to 40 metres with hardly any effort whatsoever. The Wales game showed their adherence to this process. Even when 40 points up and running riot, England still kick when it's not on because they want to play in the right areas of the field. It's about playing smart, and unlike South Africa against Australia, not letting teams off the hook, not giving them an in to the game. However, there can be no doubt that Wigglesworth has been tasked by Steve to develop a brilliant attack, and he's used the Saints' influence in order to do this. So many of the drivers of England's attack are Saints. This, combined with the work of Andrew Strawbridge, is where Wiggy is trying to evolve his team and his team's attack. Finn Smith and Fraser Dingwall, for example, both are excellent distributors and elite decision makers on the gain line, and whilst not Hutchison, are elite at picking the right option at the line which creates the try. Now, it's really critical to note that this is what Steve wanted. This was always Steve's plan, to bring an exciting, exhilarating attack to England. That was always his plan. Steve played in the 2001-2003 team under Clive Woodward, where they were renowned not only for their set-piece dominance and the 0-3 winning characteristics, but their offloading and their handling and their attacking game. This team actually influenced Wayne Smith, the man that the All Blacks called the Professor and one of the greatest attacking minds in rugby. In an article of the Rugby paper, Wayne Smith reflected back on his time with Northampton, where he actually referred to the early 2000s and was saying that in 2001 to 2003, England out-New Zealanded New Zealand. They were so innovative that his Northampton team tried to play like England, which, you know, if we're going to be a little bit ironic about it, is strange considering England are taking attacking influences from Northampton nowadays. The Northampton Saints attack is led by Sam Vesti, who is very aware that nowadays attack is what put bums in seats not only for tickets, but also it's where the game is going. So it's a bit of a win-win. When fully fit, 4 out of 7 of the England backline are Northampton Saints. You've got to think Alex Mitchell, Finn Smith, Tommy Freeman and George Furbank, they're all starters. This doesn't even mention Fraser Dingwall, who, trust me, we get onto later. But the point is that Richard Wigglesworth has taken on the Saints to guide his attack because England utilise Northampton Saints principles. The Saints' attacking philosophy isn't really that complex. Essentially, it is play to space. In an article by The Telegraph, again, brilliant journalism, highly recommend it, Vesti talks about 13 defenders stood in line with a hole between every single one of them. The Saints' objective is to be able to create options to target these holes. They also focus on the ability to target the kick spaces behind the line, but in this section, we're talking about the ability of the playmakers to bring runners on in short options targeting the gaps between defenders. Saints want a very expansive attack where the skill sets of their players can be brought to the fore. What it comes down to is knowing when to kick, pass or carry and having a structure and shape that allows them to employ any of these skills at a moment's notice. Steve wants his players to be able to use all of these skill sets to create a complete attack. For example, we know the kicking game of England has the ability, with the catch rates of the England back three, to pull the backfield out of position. This can create space. However, we also have the upskilling from Andrew Strawbridge, which has improved England's ability to thrive in chaos, further creating unstructured scenarios in the manner of Sam Vesti. However, there is a structure. There's no point talking about the vagueness of what England could be or aren't introducing, and thereby we have to go a little bit deeper in regards to this. Now, there is a structure, there are patterns, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, Wiggy introduced Sam Vesti's Northampton Saints principles into his edge attack in particular. Now, the reason he did this is pretty simple. They're really, really good. The Saints attack makes use of principles that are more relevant than ever in today's game, particularly in Test rugby where opportunities are at a premium. The principles employed are that every attack must have multiple options, it has to be skill and power based, and it has to be reactive and fluid. Now, in terms of reactive and fluid, the modern attack nowadays needs at least 3 playmakers in order to move the ball across the field easily and at any point in time. Now, Finn Smith, Marcus Smith and Henry Slade are obviously well-known playmakers who can fulfill this role, although we have to remember that George Furbank, Fraser Dingwall and co are still very, very good at this. What you're looking for are players who not only make the right decision, but players who have the skill sets in order to actually make that decision effectively. In a kick return attack against Italy, we see England line up in an attacking line with a trio of playmakers at second, third and fourth receiver, though there's an argument for Benno at first receiver, which we do discuss later on in the series. This trio axis is meant to do one thing: connect up to find the space and exploit it. It doesn't matter where the space is or which playmaker exploits it, as long as the space is found. The pass goes to Daly, who, seeing that the backfield is compromised, puts the kick in behind. Fremo regathers and scores a fairly easy try off this. Now, the ability to form a trio to find space on the field via pass or kick is critical and was used in Eddie Jones's time. In that now famous 2019 semi-final of England versus New Zealand, England had a trio of George Ford, Owen Farrell and Elliot Daly at 10, 12 and 15 respectively. Daly targeting Mwanga in the 13 channel leads to an initial break, and they've got to get the ball wide, which is where the trio of Ford, Farrell and Daly combine to move the ball to space. It's all about having skilled playmakers who can make the right decisions and get the ball to where the space is. That's really it. And if you have more of them, it means that more of the field is available within one phase. Now, 5 years later in the 24 series against New Zealand, England run a 3-2 shape with Baxter tipping on to George Martin, who makes gain line. On the next phase, Mitchell passes to Smith, who tunnel passes through the 2-pod to Slady, who passes to Furbank, who, whilst the pass is loose, manages to kick the ball to Fremo, who finds space and makes meters with a great carry, using footwork to target Reese, where he makes great post-contact meters. Now, England have access to a multitude of playmakers who can spread the ball, targeting different parts of the field where space appears. The ability to identify space and move the ball to it with their skill sets is a key reason why England's attack is so reactive. This philosophy really came to the fore at Northampton Saints under the tutelage of Chris Boyd and accelerated via the input of Sam Vesti. However, for Northampton, remember the space that they're looking for isn't necessarily overlaps. It's the space between players, meaning the Saints need a structure and shape in order to target it. Now, this is where we break down the structure of the Northampton edge attack. We talk about its structure, what it's been designed to break down, and how it operates. Currently, the key thing that attack coaches are trying to break down is the Jacques Naba adjusting defender blitz. You see, this blitz, based off the Stormers' defensive system, has been taken by multiple teams in terms of their edge defence. Characterised in the now well-known out-to-win blitz by the outside centre and wing, it blocks passing lanes and puts the second, third receiver under massive pressure, forcing errors and resulting in scrums to the defending team. Now, we have broken this defence down in multiple videos, so if you want a more forensic look at those. But the key is that the second and third receiver are put under massive pressure basically as they receive the ball. To this day, there is no surefire, foolproof way to defeat it, and it was absolutely key to South Africa's 2019 and 2023 World Cup victories. Now, because of its efficacy, elements of this defence, namely the adjusting defender out to win blitz, have become widespread. Here, In Ireland's iconic last gasp attack in the quarter-final, Ireland run a pullback to a block option, where both New Zealand adjusting defenders have to jam in on both options to snuff out the threat, basically as they receive the ball. In doing this, they give up the outside channel bridge pass, but not many teams are capable of doing it. Now, the adjusting defender blitz relies incredibly heavily on the 13-14 connection, with the 14, or the winger, mirroring the actions of the 13, as seen here with England. The second Fremo here turns in, so does Roebuck, before combining to form the maul and forcing the turnover. In the first match against Ireland, England are caught short. This leads to Slady blitzing to shut down the options, with Fremo mirroring him in his actions. The pressure imposed by this blitz leads to the knock-on, and England get the turnover. Now, this is something that as an attack coach Sam Vesti has to beat. Defence coaches across the Premiership are deploying this concept to place pressure on the second and third receivers and try and force those turnovers. The adjusting defender blitz is probably the most common defensive trend in rugby right now. And it's actually employed by Northampton, who used to have quite a passive defence, but Lee Radford has obviously seen this can be very useful in the right circumstances. Before we move on from this to the edge attack structure, however, we have to show that the line speed is now tempered, with the players or the adjusting defenders only moving up with the ball and not going beyond the ball carrier. The adjusting defender blitz used to be man-on-man flying through going beyond the ball carrier. Now, the adjusting defenders get high in the eye-line, but only close the space when the pass on their inside is thrown. This means they hit the receiver as the pass is received for maximum pressure. In this case, this results in a dominant tackle which forces a knock-on and results in an easy try for Northampton. This recent development of not going beyond the ball carrier is absolutely key. In this example, Fremo and Mitchell go beyond the ball carrier in Perifetta, which is a mistake as he manages to beat Earl. This, unfortunately, overcommitted them, meaning Perifetta only has to commit the last man and pass to Surveyor, who's a lot flatter because the England defenders have overextended and can't get back to him in time, resulting in a pretty easy try. Now, Northampton's strategy to beat this line speed is to compromise the decision-making of the adjusting defenders by isolating the space in between them. They want to weaponise this space, utilising multiple short options in order to confuse the edge defence. Now, to show the shared Northampton and England structure that exploits this space, we go back to Italy in the 2025 Six Nations. Off kick return, they run a 3-1 shape to release Finn Smith, who has what we call a playpen, or the playmaker penetrator line outside him. Simply put, the playpen line is a flat line of playmakers in red, each of whom is assigned a short option or penetrator in yellow. Optionally, the playpen line has a wide bridge pass DA option in orange and a reverse DA option on the opposite wing, which we do cover later. If you take one thing away from this strategy, however, and this is key, it's that these roles can be completely ripped up if someone sees space. Here, Daly sees space in the backfield and rather than passing to his penetrator, kicks in behind for Fremo to regather, resulting in an easy try. I cannot overstate how important this point is to both England and Northampton. There's no point in going through the hands if a direct miss pass will get to the best carrier quicker. Here, Northampton overload the blindside and rather than passing to Pollock to release Smith, Finn just calls the ball as that's where the space is, in between the defenders. Again, this reflects the principles said by Sam Vesti in the Telegraph where there's a hole in between each defender. Now, structurally, a playpen line consists of 3 to 5 players, with 5 players being the full line and 3 being the minimum. To run a full Vesti line, however, you need at least 2 playmakers. Here, against Clermont, the pass goes out to the free pod who run the pullback option to Finn Smith. Now, off Finn Smith, we can see the playpen line start to form. Here, we can see Odendahl, Dingwall, and Ram. Finn Smith has Odendahl as his penetrator, and Dingwall has Ram as his penetrator. However, Dingwall is calling for the ball as he's seen space, and therefore the ball goes to him. Now, Odendahl has held the inside D, giving Dingwall as second playmaker a direct run at the two-in defender, a key defender in modern rugby defence. You see, Dingwall still has his penetrator in Ram, so if Dingwall can commit the two-in defender, the last adjusting defender has to jam in on Ram's penetrator line, opening the bridge pass from Dingwall to Fremo on the outside. As we see this play out, this is exactly what happens, with the last adjusting defender jamming in on Ram and therefore freeing Fremo for the M1 for an easy run-in. Now, depending on defensive width, it's either the first or second playmaker that targets the two-in defender, the key being that he has a penetrator outside him to attract the last edge defender. Now, off pullback, against Leinster, we really start to see this process in play. Mitchell passes to the free pod, who have a 4-man playpen line behind them with Fremo out of shot as Lonely Boy, and Dingwall at second receiver. Now, Dingwall takes the pass and commits the two-in defender in Jamison Gibson Park. Now, because he's committed the two-in defender, that means his edge defender has to commit to his penetrator, meaning the M1 is on to Ram as the playmaker. it's an easy run-in for Ram, who also has a man outside him if he couldn't make the try line. The side-on angle really shows this well. If you take a look at Dingwall off the pullback pass, he actually squares up to Jamison Gibson Park, making sure to occupy his attention. By doing this to the two-in defender, he makes sure that his penetrator is the object of attention of the edge defender, who has to jam in on him as the out-to-in blitz, meaning the M1 is a really simple pass and sending Ram on an easy run into the try line. This was really good, but in another example a year earlier, we see how the spacings between the adjusting defenders can be isolated as well. Northampton run a playpen line off a free pod pullback consisting of Smith at playmaker, Dingwall at penetrator, Freemo at playmaker, George Furbank out of shot at penetrator, and Ram as the lonely boy option. Now, as we know, in a playpen line, the roles react to the defence, working from the inside out to find or create space. For example, in this case we see Finn Smith commit the two-in defender. Now Lowe, as the last adjusting defender, is set too wide, which means there is space for Dingwall to take the penetrator line and take the ball through before Lowe can get to him. Now Lowe via the process does jam in, but Dingwall's penetrator line is so flat and short it finds the space between the defenders. This is the working from the inside out approach, identifying space and taking it close in to pass to more space out wide, which Freemo at playmaker can take advantage of, drawing the last man in Frawley and passing to Furbank, who if the pass wasn't skewed to Ram, could have resulted in a try. This strategy requires brilliant communication, decision-making and distribution, and Steve knows that he has two saints in Finn Smith and George Furbank who are brilliant at this. However, there is also another that really needs to be considered. I am talking, of course, about Fraser Dingwall. You see, Chris Boyd, in particular, was instrumental to Fraser Dingwall's development. Very early on, Chris Boyd identified the type of player that Dingwall was and what he could bring. That being intelligent play and good decisions under pressure. If you're to take a look at Fraser Dingwall's highlights reel, you see a lot of good lines, good decision making and solid tackles. Now these are pretty much the basics, but they're done to such a high degree. And what they do, it makes the attack click. He makes the attack click. His value for Northampton Saints and for England potentially lies in these brilliant basics, his ability to work off the ball, to make the right decisions, to get the ball to the right places, and to make the right options. This is what he is magnificent at. Simply put, his brains and skill sets elevate his entire team's performance, dragging everyone up from a 6 to an 8 from his organisation and decision making. In the semi-final against Leinster in 2025, his decision making, his leadership, his ability to read the game and make the right decisions under pressure was critical. Now Boyd deserves a lot of kudos for not trying to make Dingwall something he's not. You see, Dingwall is a certain type of player, a Conrad Smith type player. Dingwall and Smith's ability is in making things happen. Unlike other centres who are all action rock stars who have great carry, great running lines and can run 110 seconds flat, Dingwall and Smith aren't the players to have all of this, like necessarily the speed and whatnot, even though the great running lines and great distribution. But they're not players like Tommy Freeman or Rico Ioane, both former wingers who have converted to centre. Because both are back three players, their highlights reel will be very different to that of a centre, because the jobs are different. They have the ability to skin the players on the edge and do all that kind of stuff, whereas centres won't, but that's not the role of a centre. This finishing ability and speed usually gives converted centres the superstar status, the type that Marcus Smith, Faye Boso, Mitchell and Freemo have. But Smith and Dingwall are not this type of player, but they don't need to be. Chris Boyd, a man who had coached Conrad Smith at the Hurricanes, immediately identified the same spirit in Fraser Dingwall, making him captain and quickly realising his value and potential in making his attack click. He didn't turn him into something else, but simply created the environment that allowed Dingwall to continue to develop in this way. The result is that Fraser Dingwall is absolutely critical and one of the first names in the Saints backline, and is critical to not only them, but maybe England as a result of this development. In prior videos, I have sounded out Tommy Freeman as a future long-term 13 for England, and against Wales he did very, very well in this role, not only on attack but in defence as well. But to put it simply going forward, this is going to be a really difficult selection conundrum for Borthwick. At his peak, it's very hard to leave Fraser Dingwall out of a team. He's been identified as a glue player by Borthwick because things happen around him, and that's because he makes the right decisions and is brilliant at his execution. This neglects to mention that the England edge attack is directly influenced by the Saints edge attack, which in turn is what Fraser Dingwall helps run. This is a huge string to his bow, and is something Wigglesworth and now Blackett have to consider because he has the innate skill sets and decision-making ability in this system from running it every day. Now, one question you may be asking is, how long has this been going on? How long have Northampton been influencing the English attack? Well, the Telegraph again provides, showing at the 24 Six Nations that Finn Smith and George Furbank worked closely with Wigglesworth on what the edge attack looks like, how it operates, and how it's meant to target the opposition. This is what you've been waiting for, how England are using Northampton principles. So, let's have a look at what Wigglesworth's taken, the pictures he's presenting, and how it's directing the England attack. Now, we know that Northampton Saints have had a huge impact on England. However, Wigglesworth himself should take huge credit, namely in his aerial kicking game, which is going to be absolutely elite when it's finished. This is all part, of course, of building the complete attack, with a multitude of skill sets to call on. However, in relation to the influences taken from Sam Vesti, England have multiple shapes and launch points, namely, that they utilise. We will be breaking all of these down in detail, don't worry, but in terms of shape, we have line shape and block shape, the two edge attack shapes that England use. Regarding launch points, they have split, long, and finally, overload. Now, in relation to what launch points are, they are basically the points on the field from where an attack is launched. Now, if any of this is somewhat familiar to you, it may be that you're recognising the influences on Sam Vesti's attack, namely the French and Irish attacks. Now, the first influence we're going to look at from the French attack on a Sam Vesti attack are the launch points. The first being the long launch point, or the full width launch. Now, earlier we showed you a full 5-man playpen line and how it was used against Clermont. Finn Smith takes the pull back and puts the M1 to Dingwall, who has his penetrator outside him in ram. He commits the 2-in defender and thereby is able to throw the M1 over to the Lonely Boy option in Freeman. It's great use of the playpen line and great identification of space, working inside to out to find the space and eventually finding the only option that has space, which was Freeman. Now, this attack was launched from a long launch point. Now, the long launch point is situated just inside the 15-metre line as shown by the red marker here. It is primarily used to launch full-width playpen lines off pullback or off 10, which is exactly what happens here. Finn Smith runs a tunnel pass through his free pod to his second receiver, who tries to commit the 2-in defender in the line with his penetrator outside him and the Lonely Boy option out further. One thing to note, however, is this is the 2-in line defender, as a third defender comes up from the backfield into the line. Now, the next launch point is overload, or flooding the blind. This is a very common tactic with Northampton and England, with 4 men at the least in a playpen line flooding the blind side to try and overwhelm the defence. Mitchell goes himself, but we see the playmaker penetrator, with the Lonely Boy not applicable here, as there was never only one man in the 15-metre channel. Now, Mitchell goes himself, which means the playpen line isn't used, but in another example we can really see its use. Finn Smith targets the 2-in defender here with Furbank as his penetrator. Smith committing the 2-in defender allows Furbank a dominant carry, allowing him to free his arms and offload to the playmaker, who then puts Slightholme in for an easy run-in. This is probably one of the most important launch points. The last launch point is the split, or splitting the field. As you can imagine, it's in the middle of the field launch point. Now, split is used in 2 different ways, taking advantage of the lack of rush defence from the middle of the field. The first way is building to overload via off-9, off-10 carries, getting to the launch point just outside the 15-metre line where they can then flood their playpen line in to take advantage of the created space. This is one way the split launch point is used. We can also see it being used to launch a full playpen line directly from the middle of the field. Here, the ball goes to Finn Smith, who has his playpen line set tight to compress the defence, which in turn opens space for the Lonely Boy in Fremo, who with a better pass could be away here. As a general rule, how spread the playpen line is dictates the launch point and attacking strategy employed. Hopefully, we can see the Sam Vesti principles here of finding the spaces in between defenders, but also the influences that the French attack has had on the Northampton Saints team. Being heads up and fluid, the way of the Northampton Saints under Vesti, is exactly how Galtier coaches his team in terms of their attack. In the Wibble Rugby, the French attack video, we discussed the launch points of Fabien Galtier's team and how the strategies were based around that. The strategies being Submerger, Surcharger and Attire, or Overwhelm, Overload and Stretch. Now, Surcharger and Attire in particular depend incredibly heavily on the launch point chosen, traditionally just outside the 15-metre lines. In the French video, we take a look at Galtier's Montpellier team, where we see a multitude of backs lined up ready to flood into the 15-metre channel in the strike zone from this launch point. Now, their aim is to overwhelm a thinly defended blind created by the prior off-9 carries, and using numbers overwhelm this section of the line using their numbers, speed, offloading and footwork. Now Gaultier and Vesti's overload principles do differ somewhat, with Gaultier favouring 2 lines of attack and Vesti favouring 1. However, for both coaches, the launch point is critical. Here Montpellier build towards their long position, or étiré, where they're in a position where they can use a full width attack via all their backs moving from one side of the field to the other. Now the reason we've taken this trip back down memory lane is that Northampton Saints have been influenced by France, and England themselves have been influenced by Northampton Saints, particularly on launch point. Knowing this, let's take a look at the shapes that England employ and where they launch them predominantly from. The first, of course, being line shape, or the single level attack line. We've seen this plenty of times already with Northampton, but England have taken it pretty much copy and paste and employed it into their own game. Here, against Wales in 2024, we can see Ben Earl take the ball at first receiver and pull back to George Ford with his playpen line. Now George Ford runs at the 2-in defender again, trying to commit him in order to release Slade, his penetrator, into the 13 channel. Now Williams makes a great read, jamming in on Slady and stopping the attack. However, whilst this was launched from split, it must be noted that line shape is exceptionally common on overload. Against Ireland in 2024, England used line shape to launch a 4-man playpen line, committing the inside men via catch and pass and creating a try within the first 4 minutes of the game. This set the stall for the attacking rugby that England played that day, and was a great reminder that rugby is a numbers game. Off kick return, Fremo's carry makes the space for this move. 4 England players organise into a playpen line, and only 2 Irish players move in to mark the space. Ford takes the ball and targets the 2-in defender, using his penetrator the same way that Northampton do. By committing the 2-in defender, he forces the last adjusting defender to jam in on Furbank, who releases Slade, and then it's a simple 2-on-1, and Lawrence as a result can finish a well-worked try. However, it has remained a staple into 2025, and we've seen England continue to use it against multiple teams in multiple situations. England scored 2 tries from this against Ireland, the first being a Slade kick through into the kick space behind which Murley regathered, and then in the second half, Randall fires and then one to Lawrence, who manages to beat his man and then offloads to Murley, who after committing the last backfield defender, offloads inside to Tom Curry, who goes over for the second try. This is the first shape that Wigglesworth has taken. The second shape is block shape, which is far more prevalent with England than it is Northampton Saints, as it integrates a back as the blocker. Here, against Wales in 24, we see England camped on their line. Now, we see them playing pick and go, trying to get to the line. However, George Ford here starts organising the playpen line, calling guys behind him to get into position. Now, they're still setting up, and as the forwards are camped literally under the sticks, they go for another jack option. Getting close, but no cigar. Then, Fordy calls for the ball, forming his 4-man playpen line with a blocking line in Ollie Lawrence highlighted in blue. Now this picture for the adjusting defenders is a nightmare to defend. Ford commits the 2-in defender before passing to his second playmaker in Daly, who commits the last man before offloading to the lonely boy option in Fraser Dingwall. Now whilst this is block shape, not line shape, the same principles between the two are followed. If we look from above, we can see the options that Ford has. Now if we play it out to get to the point where Ford releases the ball, you've got to look at the picture that the last 2 adjusting defenders have to deal with. Mitchell fires a long pass to Ford, who does his job. He takes the ball, goes up to the line, committing the 2-in defender. Now Fordy has a multitude of options as he's committed the 2-in defender. He can hit the 13 channel via his penetrator, which will force the last edge defender to jam into cover. He could go for the blocker line in Ollie Lawrence targeting the same space, or the slice option in Daly going behind, or, if all these options were covered, as a sensational distributor, he can throw the bridge pass over to the lonely boy option in Fraser Dingwall, who can take the ball on the fly, taking it to the line. The key here is whilst they pick the slice option to Daly, who releases Dingwall, all of these guys are options into the last second, and all of them are options reacting to the defence. Via multiple options and good communication, he can pick the option most likely to find the space. This is shown brilliantly here, with Mitchell passing to Finn Smith as Smith has called the ball as he is the best option for space, going in between the 2 defenders. This is the critical lesson of this video. Yes, there's playmakers and penetrators, but every player can call the ball. If they see space, it doesn't matter your role, you can break out of the structure, make yourself an option and call the ball. And England's distributors, being brilliant distributors, will find a way to get the ball to you, either via mispass or via the next playmaker. Now, as every edge attack has multiple options, this means that England coaches have to accelerate the skill sets, because they need to accelerate these skill sets in order to pick what can sometimes be a very hard option. Now, the good news is that England are blessed with playmakers and distributors who can pick the right option. Against Argentina here, the ball goes out to Fordy, he passes to Atkinson, whose both penetrator and playmaker line are blocked off, which is why he goes for the lonely boy option via the bridge pass. The pass is sensational, with Muir running onto it and making 15 metres for England. Against Wales, we see something similar, with Finn Smith firing the ball over Curry and Smith to Roebuck, who is the best option for space at that time, who goes over for the try. It's all about developing the skill sets to pick the best option in space. But how do they generate this space? Well, as we inferred to in the French attack video, it's all about achieving dominant off-9 and off-10 carries in the centre of the field, because if you can do this, you can suck in defenders and thereby overload a thinly defended edge with your playpen line set up and ready to go. Now, in 2024, Steve actually thought ahead with this. Knowing this would be a critical area, he hired former All Black skills coach Andrew Strawbridge. Strawbridge has a few remits that we cover later in the series, but the key one in this case is the contact area. Straws' influence in the contact area has been vital to England's success. In the Six Nations stats courtesy of Optajohnny, England had the highest tackle evasion stats, and in percentage line breaks resulting in the try, they were only 3% behind France, with a huge drop down to third place. Now last but not least, in both the fields of dominant carries and gainline success, they topped the charts in both metrics. Now, this is surprising because you probably would expect France to have this honour. France's submerger strategy and their off-9 power game is hugely reliant on the size and power of their tight 5 forwards in particular. In this example, France aren't doing anything particularly sexy. This is simple, pure and outright power and brutality. Off-9 carries going again and again until they get their try. Now, Straws' influence has been critical for multiple reasons, but the key one in this case is that England's edge attack is built around shape, and the shape has to have dominant carries, because if you don't get dominant carries, you don't thin the edge and you can't use your edge attack like England want to. Now, in terms of their attacking shape, England employ multiple shapes. The same way with South Africa, it really depends on ruck resourcing needs, what players you can spare, how many players need to actually be on their feet, so on and so forth. In this case, they're using a 3-3-2. Under Wiggy, a multitude of shapes have been used in the England attack. They've used a 3-3-2, a 3-3-1, a 3-4-1, a 1-3-2-2, a 2-3-2-1, a 1-3-4, and a 1-4-2-1. The common denominator among these shapes, and the key thing that Wiggy wants, is that these shapes must deliver dominant carries, because if they do, they can then launch into their line shape and block shape on the edge attack. For example, after the 3-3 hit up here, the ball goes to Marcus Smith, who has block shape formed outside him, with Slade as his penetrator, Stewart as the second playmaker, Fremo at Lonely Boy, and Ollie Lawrence as the blocker. Now Marcus picks the blocker option in Ollie Lawrence, targeting the 2-in defender, and with an intention to set up overload with a 4-man playpen on the next phase. Now Lawrence picks a great line which kaputs this plan a little bit. You see, he makes such good gain line that Slady comes in as a CT support runner to try and take the offload, however, he doesn't get it away. However, by passing it out of contact, they do achieve quick ball, with a 3-man playpen line set up and ready to exploit this space, with Marcus Smith kicking into the kick space behind. I cannot stress how important it is to get quick ball here. By passing out of the tackle here, England achieve quick ball, which means they can get their playpen line into position faster than the defenders can fold. Essentially, it allows them to overload on next phase. Against Argentina, we see England going through a series of hard off-10 power carries, trying to get to the edge. Working around a 3-2 system, forward releases Atkinson, who commits the 2-in defender, putting his forward runner into the 13 channel. As the blind side has been primed, England try to flood a 3-man playpen line into the space before the Pumas can reinforce it. England are very unlucky here, with Ford targeting the 2-in defender and the last edge defender professionally knocking on the ball to deny Stewart's penetrator line. One thing I want you to remember for the future though, is Atkinson didn't join them in the playpen line. Just remember this, because it does come up later. Now, in a successful example, we see England launch a 3-1 shape from a long launch point. Furby releases the tunnel pass to Smith, who has his playpen line outside of him and Stewart integrated into it. He selects his penetrator in Ollie Lawrence, who makes gain line, and quick ball is achieved. With excellent off-the-ball work, Smith organises his playpen line outside him. The defence are drifting so hard to cover the outside men, it opens the gap for Smith, who goes straight through. There are so many examples of breaks and tries that England have created using this overload. The end-on angle really shows it. The wide pass gets Smith outside the entire Wallaby fringe defence, activating an overly excessive drift. Because of this, the gap that Marcus takes so often at Harlequins is opened, which he takes and makes the break up the inside. Now, one thing that England have really trained and drilled is the fluidity within the structure. Developing total rugby means that the attack on the edge needs to be reactive to what is happening in front of it. Against South Africa, England form a 4-man playpen line with Underhill on the inside, which is the option that's taken. Now, England managed to secure quickish ball, with JVP passing to the free pod on the off-9 carry. They hit up the midfield, and via a split launch point, JVP passes to a free pod who pulls back to Marcus with a 4-man playpen line in block shape. Now, following inside-out protocol, Marcus picks his penetrator in Slade, who in turn switches to a catch and pass line trying to put Lawrence into space. However, with Colby adjusting defender, this doesn't work out the way we want it to. However, if we rewind this back to the start, There are so many alternative options here that Marcus could have taken. For example, he could have passed behind Slade on a short option to Stewart running a league slice option, with Lawrence coming off Stewart as a short option. Slade on the penetrator line could take the ball from Marcus and pass behind the blocker line in Lawrence to Stewart coming through on the slice option. Or lastly, Slade could take the pass, take the ball to the line, and then using Lawrence as a penetrator, pass over him via the bridge pass to Earl on the wing. What I'm trying to show here is the chaos inherent in this situation, as England's attack is reacting to changes in the defensive line as they happen in real time, and therefore it's a question we have to ask, is this fluid or is it messy? Coaching your players to thrive in chaos is essential nowadays, as you're not always going to get perfect pictures in attack. For example, Ford passes to Atkinson, who's running a 4-man playpen line. Now he commits the 2-in defender and you get this picture here. The last edge defender has had to remain tight due to Roebuck's very convincing penetrator line. This means the M1 to Stewart at playmaker is on, who then goes on to release Muir down the wing. Now, alternatively, if the last edge defender drifts instead of holds, then you get this situation. Ford passes to Atkinson, who again targets the 2-in defender. Now, in this case, 14 has drifted early to cover the playmaker line of Coles, in turn opening the 13 channel in Ford's penetrator Roebuck. Now, this is exactly what happens. Ford, using inside-out protocol, passes to Roebuck, who goes straight through. The 14 can't get to him, and he kicks ahead for Murley to chase. Now this was a terrible decision, and he knows it, because if he'd passed, it's probably a try. Now, Test match rugby is kinetic. You're not always going to get perfect pictures like this where the decision is easy. Instead, you're going to get players in the wrong position. You're going to get running lines that are skewed. You're going to get support players not at the right depth. You're going to get pushing the pass. You're going to get a lot more messy. However, these messy, unstructured, chaotic scenarios are opportunities, and Total Rugby is the ability to make the most of every single one. As defenders adjust and holes appear to the playpen line, they need to be able to take them. This is why it looks so messy, because it's so reactive to what's happening in front of them. Now, Kevin Sinfield and Andrew Strawbridge are there to upskill the players to help them thrive in these scenarios. And trust me, upskilling really, really works. In a quick line-out by England, the ball gets to Marcus Smith, who finds space behind his line due to the Wallabies overextending. Passing to Lawrence, who gets just inside the 22. Now the ball needs to go wide now, except Alex Dombrandt steps in at first receiver. Now the playpen line now form off him, and he runs straight at the 2-in defender in Suwaili. Marcus Smith, as Dombrandt's penetrator, attracts the last edge defender, meaning a simple M1 puts slight home in. This is the benefit of upskilling, creating players who not only know their roles, but the roles of every other player on that pitch. This is imperative, as if the space is there and there's not a 10, 12 or 15 available, you can't wait for them to be ready. You've got to go. Players need to be able to step in to do this role, and Dombrandt shows he can do this brilliantly. There is a structure and shape to the playpen line. Borthwick wants every player in his team, regardless of number, to know it and be able to run it, the same way that England in 03 did, because if space is available and a playmaker isn't available to exploit it, Steve wants 14 other players who can step in to run the playpen line and get to it. The principle is the number on your back does not matter. You can have centres who can play at fly half, you can have back rows who can play as wing. It really doesn't matter. In this restart return attack, Dombrandt regathers the ball and charges straight into the midfield, making some good post-contact meters and setting up a split launch point. Spencer passes to Coles in the 2-pod, who runs directly into the overload launch point, which makes sense due to England setting a playpen line to overload on the next phase, which they do use. Quickish ball is generated, and Spencer passes to Ford, who uses his second playmaker in Carpenter to try and find space. It doesn't work on this occasion, and as a result, England set up into their 3-3-2 shape to try and fin the opposite edge. Coles carries into contact first, unfortunately not making much gain line. Then the ball goes to Ford, who tries to dance and create a little bit of space for Joe Hayes, which unfortunately doesn't come off that well. It's not a terrible carry, however, and it sets a split launch point. Now Spencer gets the ball to Ford, who has the 2-pod outside him, Beard on the inside, and Slady at pullback. Now, Fordy pulls back to Slady, who has Atkinson as his penetrator. Slady commits the 2-in defender in Fiku, before passing to Atkinson, who, after drawing the last defender, releases Roebuck on the wing. Roebuck then runs riot, making huge meterage but moving infield to target the overload launch point so England can run overload if they want on the next phase. Now, Joe Carpenter has his arm up and therefore we can assume it will be a long launch point. However, we can see Slady calling for it in the far side as well, and Fordy moves over because he's seen the space is on the overload side. If he wanted, Fordy could run either a long or an overload attack right now because of the launch point. Now Slady has already organised the playpen line outside him with Dombrandt and Ted Hill. Now Fordy comes in at first receiver, making Slady a penetrator. Forming line shape, Fordy commits the 2-in defender before releasing Slade, who with a simple catch and pass puts Dommers in for an easy try. If Dommers and Hill don't load to the blind side, this try probably isn't scored. The principle is, if you see where space is, don't wait, just take it. Under Blackett, this has taken a step forward. Against Argentina, England send the box kick up and use their chaser, foxes and phalanx principle we showed in the New England way. Murley taps back and Underhill as one of the foxes regathers, taking the ball into contact. Now England get quick ball, and when JVP passes we don't see a phalanx D-line, but a set 3-2-1 attack shape with Stewart moving forward as playmaker in case Ford fires the tunnel pass to him. Now, while the free pod takes contact, this is a huge shift from the phalanx D-line that was automatically set assuming we wouldn't get the ball back. JVP passes to Ford, who tunnel passes to Atkinson, who releases a 4-man playpen in line shape off Stewart. Fire inside-out protocol, though it could be a little better. They draw and pass, making massive meterage and putting Dommers into the 22. Now we do get into this in the third video, but composure in the wide channels and the dark arts of catch and pass is one reason Steve Borthwick has brought in Lee Blackett. However, this is definitely a later revelation. Right now, we need to discuss Richard Wigglesworth and what he's been doing to improve England's aerial kicking attack. Now, Wigglesworth started as a kicking strategy coach, the same role he performed with the Lions. As an attack coach, however, he's been able to take this knowledge he has and apply it to the attack, utilising the kicking threats that they have in the England team. What Wigglesworth is introducing, principally, is a natural evolution of England's bolt rugby strategy. It's all about getting upfield and getting their catchers opportunities to win the ball back with their brilliant catch rate. England are advancing their attacking kicking game to regain the ball back in positions that allow them to score tries. The player that this strategy is centred around is the lonely boy, or the wide DA option. Via the playpen line, we've seen that the lonely boy can be the man who receives the bridge pass when the inside options are covered. Now the bridge pass can unlock this option, but England want to be able to unlock it via DA or crossfield kick as well. Now, to show you a really good example of this, we show you a kick return attack against New Zealand in 2024. England form a split launch point, and as we can see, England have formed a 5-man playpen line from the split point, with Tommy Freeman as the lonely boy. Now we know this formation is designed to narrow the defence to prime the wide channel. By running the playmakers and penetrators tight, they narrow the defence, meaning the bridge pass to the lonely boy is on. Now due to the width of the lonely boy, it can be assumed that it's a very handy location for a crossfield kick. England here use their playpen line but don't get out wide. Now we're not going to go through the remaining stages because we know exactly how the ball in hand works here. Or hopefully you do if you've been paying attention. They use their shape to thin the edge before moving into the blind with overload. Via off-9 carry using a 3-3-2 shape, England get to the long launch point where we see a tight playpen line set up. Now the tightness of this line by default narrows the defence as they have to cover for the short options. This in turn primes the edge for the DA or the crossfield kick. However, we also have the reverse DA lonely boy, which we do discuss later. But this time, it's not used. The DA goes up and Tommy Freeman chases after it with Ollie Lawrence's support on his inside. Now Freemo gets a one-on-one with Talea, outreaching him, grabbing the ball and going over for an easy try. This is all about using England's strengths to create an elite kicking game. England's back three have some of the best catch rates in the world. Of course you're going to use them. Against Argentina, Muir as the chaser chases the kick, managing to put pressure on and allowing the ball to be regathered by one of the Foxes in Tom Willis. Now Willis takes the ball into contact, and as we've noted, England have improved hugely in terms of realignment. As we can see, when Spencer gets his hands on the ball, he passes to not a transition in D-line, but a free pod with Ford behind them and a 5-man playpen line off him. Now the Pumas D is caught narrow, and England try to move the ball wide immediately to exploit this. Now, whilst it didn't work this time, they do set up their long launch point and set up a 3-3-1 attack shape, with both Atkinson and Stewart moving across field to overload the far edge. The ball goes to split, and off 10, Ford releases the far man in the 4-pod with Atkinson behind, ready to try and take the ball and move forward if possible. Now not even Atkinson can reload this quickly. Now whilst there's no blindside now, this means that Fordy runs a return to a 3-pod who truck up and form a new launch point at long. Now, they form a launch point and Fordy organises the playpen line. Now, the ball goes to Fordy, who has a 2-pod and a playpen line off him. However, he goes for the DA option. The crossfield kick goes high and the defence has been narrowed, meaning that Roebuck, in orange here as the lonely boy, gets a 1-on-1, which is something that this man does not often lose. Regathering the ball means he's quickly swarmed, but his support are on his shoulder to take the offload and move the ball to the line in a beautiful piece of support play. This support is critical, not just for continuity in attack, but for turnover defence if they get the ball. The support players come from the playmakers and penetrators of the playpen line. Here, Fremo's calling for the ball and the playpen line have constricted the defence, meaning the bridge pass gets Fremo outside and on the edge. Fremo takes it, and Curry turns from a penetrator to a support player to continue the attack via offload. Now, getting back to the kicking game, the only team I've seen use these strategies in recent times as prolifically as England is South Africa. Here, they narrow the defence before putting the crossfield kick out to Pieter-Steph du Toit, who regathers and then pops the pass to his supporting player in Craiger Smith, who goes over for the try. This has been very lethal for both teams, and Borthwick wants to improve the lethality of his England team by making sure multiple players have the ability to crossfield kick. Here, in training, we see a line of playmakers with Atkinson practicing his crossfield kick, and we can assume George Ford coming next and then Max Ajomo after. This is impressive, but it's still a well-known strategy. The next strategy we're going to show you is borderline outright innovation and genius. I am talking, of course, about the reverse DA, or the reverse crossfield kick. England have sensational tactical kickers. Finn Smith, Marcus Smith and George Ford, all of them are sensational at this part of the game. As attack coach, Wigglesworth is of course going to use them, and this is where he has really earned the bacon. The reverse DA is intended to manipulate the backfield to put England's strong catchers against weak, out-of-position targets. Against France 15, England moved left, looking to set up a split launch to run the playpen line on the left. However, we see Fordy turn and raise his arm, followed by the Lonely Boy option in Ted Hill doing the same. Now, this is well telegraphed, but rather than using his playpen line, Fordy turns and launches the reverse DA back towards Ted Hill, who has support on his inside. Now, the kick is a little too long, but if it was shorter, you have Ted Hill going up against the 9 in Nolan Le Garrec. This is a huge mismatch and is a reason why it's so lethal. It's also proven incredibly effective in past uses. Against France in the Six Nations, we see England set up a split launch point with a 4-man playpen line outside Smith and Curry on the inside, which is the option that Smith takes. Curry takes the ball into contact and England reverse the play. Off 9, they start moving across the field with an intention, of course, to fin the far edge. However, the key thing to note here is Antoine Dupont's positioning as the edge defender. As the short side captain, this is the right place for him to be, but you're about to see him get manipulated in the backfield. You see England set to go left. Mitchell passes to Finn Smith, who is attacking the left-hand side, and thereby the backfield move over to cover this potential options. However, Finn Smith turns back because he's seen the space and he knows Fremo as the reverse DA is well placed to take it. Fremo standing so flat gives him every opportunity to get under the ball, outleaping BLBR8 and stepping Dupont, who is still scrambling to get back into position as he didn't think he was needed here. This resulted in a wonderful try and it was lauded as a brilliant piece of heads-up play. And it was, but what we have to remember is that this is actually a built option. Also, it's something they've been doing for a while. Against Japan in 2024, England shaped to go left around a 2-pod. However, Marcus Smith turns because he sees the backfield out of position and realises Henry Slade has a chance of the reverse DA here. Slade is flat, meaning he can get under the ball, and after this kick goes up, the edge defence and the backfield are completely out of position, which means Slade goes over practically untouched. Now, against Wales, we see it again. Fordy initially shapes left and then turns, going back to the reverse DA with Tom Roebuck. Roebuck is stood flat, meaning he's going to have every opportunity to get under the ball. George Ford sends the ball high and then Roebuck goes through with Ben Earl. He catches the ball and nearly offloads to Ben Earl, but it doesn't quite take on this occasion. Now, this is potentially game-changing, but it's only one way in which Wiggy has evolved this kicking attack. The next area of innovation, which I'm so excited about, are direction taps. Now, in the New England Way video, there was a dynamic that I predicted we might see. You see, England's kick chase is based around a chaser getting up to tap the ball back to their foxes. Now, in this video, we discussed how this tap back could be directional. How the ball couldn't just be tapped back 6 o'clock, but it could be tapped to 3 or 9 o'clock to a player coming through on the hard line. Against Scotland, Fremo works hard here to get through the net to tap the ball to Ethan Roots. But imagine if he heard Ben Earls here screaming 3 o'clock, and adjusted accordingly. If he could tap to Ben Earl coming through on the hard line, it's a race to the line. Now, this was only a theory, so I put it out of thought and mind until I saw this. Freddie Stewart going up not to catch the ball, but to tap it in a certain direction. This piqued my interest big time, as I can't think of a reason to do this other than to train directional taps. But then we saw it. England, after a bunch of off-9 carries, reversed the play, passing to the 3-pod who have the playpen line set up outside them. Now on the opposite side, we see Ben Curry not only get deep but look over to the wing because he knows what's coming. JVP here looks up and even he knows because they've got a penalty advantage, they have a free play here. Curry has retreated to a position where he can be a viable support runner. As such, JVP knows he needs to get the ball to Ford, and he does. He passes to Ford, who runs the reverse DA. However, Ford could run the reverse DA to Curry if this was where the space was. However, it isn't, and he launches the crossfield kick. Now Roebuck gets under it with both Curry and Domers in support, but as we see, Roebuck doesn't catch it, he taps it. And he taps it to his support, who unfortunately overrun it. But the key principle here for the support is that they must be close for attack continuity, or if the Argentinians get it, transition defence. This is the innovation that a kicking strategy coach can bring to an attack. This could be absolutely revolutionary, and I'm not actually overestimating the impact of this. The immediate moment after kick regain is arguably the most lethal time to strike. England have some of the most lethal catchers in the world. Fremo, Roebuck and Faye Roboso, they're all magnificent, but if they regain the ball, they can be tackled and they immediately become the source of attention, which is the reason for the directional taps. If Roebuck catches here, when he lands he's immediately nailed. However, if he taps, he can tap to a supporting player coming through, one who hasn't got any attention on him and who can take the ball through to the try line. This is really shown well against Wales. Ford receives the ball, shaping to go left before running the reverse DA back to Roebuck. Now Roebuck chases hard, with Ben Earl accompanying him in support. Now Roebuck is able to outleap Blair Murray and get the ball, trying to offload to Ben Earl. Now unfortunately this doesn't go to hand, and we can literally see the of Odin let out by Ben Earl here, because if he takes this on the full, it's a straight run to the line. Now, hopefully we can see that the tactical kicking brilliance of England's playmakers combined with the aerial excellence of their wingers makes this a lethal weapon for them. However, it isn't just wingers who are able to do this. Henry Pollock, one of England's rising stars, predicted his own try-scoring debut against Wales. In an article of the BBC, we can see that Pollock was predicting to Tommy Freeman that he would score his first try on the wing. Fast forwarding to the Wales game, we see England set in overload, with Ford receiving the ball and then firing an M2 over to Pollock on the wing. Using his speed and power, he's able to run on to Ford's sublime pass and manages to get round the last edge defender, thereby scoring the try and making his own prediction come true. Now Pollock knew that he would score here. Now as good as Henry Pollock is, he is not Mystic Meg and does not have psychic ability that we know of. He knew this because in a Richard Wigglesworth attack, back rowers often find themselves on the wing, as well as centres actually. Against New Zealand, England launched from overload with a 4-man playpen line. Now the ball's received by Marcus Smith, who has the lonely boy option in Ben Earl, highlighted in orange. The logic here is sound. With a back row out wide, you have greater ruck security and a better chance of achieving lightning quick ball. But also, if you have a back row here, it frees up a roaming winger, which is a concept that we're going to talk you through now. Off kick return, we see Manny Faye Roboso highlighted in orange on the far wing, with England setting up to form a split launch point. Now, they truck up the midfield and set a ruck. Mitchell runs a quick pick and go and the ball is again secured. But here, we see Manny Faye Roboso pop into frame. He has come in off his wing to offer a more present running threat. Fremo can be seen at Lonely Boy, and on the other side, replacing Manny, is Earl at reverse DA. These role changes may not seem like much, but they illustrate how skilled the players have to be and how expansive the attack is. England run an off-9 carry and then use their playpen line. But on the opposite side of the field, we can see Ben Earl with his arm out here calling for the full field DA. This shows how imperative kicking is to finding space in the England attack. If we flash back to Argentina 2025, we may remember the situation where we showed you an overload, with Seb Atkinson, however, holding back. This is imperative as 3 England players are folding round to strike the blind. However, we need Atkinson to remain here in case on the next phase there's a crossfield kick option needed to the other side of the field. Remember, the overload will commit the last of the backfield defence, meaning on the next phase the crossfield kick or wide play will be on. We know England have been training this, with Atkinson, Ford and Ajomo all in a line practicing their crossfield kicks in training. As a result, we can assume that all are being trained in the kicking attack strategies, these being full field DA, reverse DA, and the grubber kicks into space behind the line. With the full field DA, the first strategy we're going to be breaking down. However, under Wigglesworth, it's key to note that these strategies are designed to allow England to strike anywhere on the field at a second's notice. This is one of the reasons Steve Borthwick wanted Wigglesworth at attack coach, because he knows this game. Against New Zealand, England's use of the playpen line from the split launch point activates the backfield pendulum of the All Blacks, with the players moving into position to cover not only the overlap, but the kick through. Now, the play breaks down, but the backfield have been pulled out of position. This is where you need one of your playmakers. It can be Fordy, Finn Smith, Dingwall, Atkinson, George Furbank, Marcus Smith or Max Ajomo, and their ability to crossfield kick, all of them in this case, is imperative. This means that any one of them can step in at first receiver as shown here. That means that when Ben Earl calls for the ball, they can immediately run the DA to get the ball to space before the backfield defence have managed to move back over in order to cover this option. This is what England are learning to strike. They're learning to strike this point before it can be reinforced. And the kicking game is realistically the only way to do this, which is why Atkinson stays here and doesn't join them in the overload. Because if the attack breaks down, he's here to then strike the most exploitable space. Now, England, in relation to the aerial kicking game, try to get the odds in their favour as much as physically possible. For example, Felix Jones used to get his players to analyse the catching positions of the backfield opposition players so that they could get an advantage in the aerial game. Now, England have adopted this level of analysis, which is why they're so brilliant at the catch regain. It's essentially about taking a bunch of players who are already brilliant under the high ball, but then giving them IP and information on the opposition so that they know exactly how to catch the ball for maximum effect. Wiggy, and now Blackett's role, is all about getting their players to understand when to use each strategy. In this case, they're using a 4-man playpen line, with the backfield moving into position to cover the options. Now, the ball is secured, and with quick ball, England launch into their shape to thin the edge, with the backfield and reloaders moving behind the line to reinforce it. However, while this could work, we see Ben Earl here with his arm out requesting the cross kick or the full field DA from Marcus Smith before the reloaders and backfield can reinforce the far edge. This would make it an aerial 1v1, but instead they build to their split launch point, where as they truck up the midfield we can see Damien Diolende reloading behind the line to reinforce the far edge. JVP passes to the free pod who pull back to the playpen line, but they are now attacking a reinforced edge because Damien Diolende and the backfield have reloaded. Now, it's important to note that this can work with dominant carries and quick ball, but against the Springboks it's very hard to get these. The full field DA therefore allows England to strike the far edge before the defenders have had time to reload into it. This means that you strike a weakened edge rather than a reinforced defensive line, which with numbers can simply blitz up and force the knock-on, earning the scrum. But here's an interesting question to pose to you. What if England know this is going to go bad and don't use their playpen line? This is the benefit of Wigglesworth coaching his team to be able to strike any point on the field at any given time. Say because of the reinforcement, Smith knows the playpen line won't work, so he reverses back to this launch point. Now from here, you can run a reverse DA, knowing that the ball can simply go to Marcus Smith and then he can reverse DA it to Ollie Slightholme. He will be going up against an out-of-position Cheslin Colby, against whom he has a height advantage, with Sam Underhill in support on his inside. And as an additional win, there's no backfield presence. Now, how do we know this was an option? Well, we've already seen it with Henry Slade against Japan. Marcus Smith is fully invested in the left-hand side attack here. He has a 4-man playpen line based around a 2-pod, and we can see both wingers are actually in the playpen line. However, he has Slade on the far wing at reverse DA. Now, because the backfield are moving out of position, this side of the field is probably more exploitable than the playpen line he has set up, which is why he goes back for the reverse DA. He's proved right, with Slade taking the ball on the full, and because the backfield are out of position, they hardly get a hand to him. Now, once this philosophy is fully integrated into their ball-in-hand attack, it could render traditional defences completely useless. Now, this strategy is the result of Wigglesworth using the strengths currently found in the England team, with brilliant tactical kickers and brilliant aerial threats in the back three. But on top of this, we've got to remember it's not just the back three that can do this, but the back row and centres as well. It's about being able to strike space on the rugby field anywhere and at any time. This is also going to cause defensive coaches headaches too. Say they modify the pendulum so that they split the wings so the options are covered. Well, this will open space in the centre, which can create more space in between defenders to target, which, as we've shown, is Northampton's principle and therefore England's principle. These larger gaps bring the penetrators into play via inside-out protocol, or if the wingers are hugging the touchline, this can open space behind the line for the grubber kick, which Hendy chases here, and the backfield defence are too far away to get to him in time, meaning it's a pretty easy try. Wigglesworth's entire aim has been to create a complete attack, an attack that literally no defence can stop due to the skill sets and dynamics involved in it. It's about employing the widest range of skill sets that allows them to relentlessly challenge the defence in so many ways to such a degree that they won't be able to cover all of these options all of the time. Now, having the complete attack is 100% non-negotiable to Steve Borthwick, which is why he's brought in Lee Blackett. Remember, Blackett wasn't just offered this job out of the blue. First, he was appointed as head coach in charge of their England A attack, which he performed to a great success. But then, he had to prove that he was able to develop the England attack on the Argentina tour in the manner and style already built by Richard Wigglesworth. This is the key line in this article. As it shows, Steve is not starting over and throwing away the work that Wiggy has done. Now, in another article, we see that Borthwick has requested Blackett remodel the attack. Now, we have to be very careful on what this actually means. You see, if we go back down here, we can see that Steve has said from the outset that obviously while we have to carry over some stuff, this stuff being the general principles, shapes and philosophies of the England edge attack, it must also be a reflection of what Lee wants, which is why he's going to bring his own flavour to it. He's going to bring the off-the-ball work and positioning, moving wider sooner with better timing and alignments. He's also going to bring in a shorter passing game with a heavy fringe attack focus. Also adding to the kicking game that England use, not just off 10, but off 9, including diagonals, grubbers and kickovers, short chip kicks and more. He will definitely be focusing on catch position, pass delivery, and the dark arts of catch and pass. And lastly, he'll be introducing new shapes and variations from existing launch points, so we don't just have block and line shape, but other niche ones as well. In this way, his role is very similar to Tony Brown for the Springboks, where he has to add and not subtract. Wiggy has already set the foundations of what the attack will look like. Using the skill sets gained from Andrew Strawbridge and Kevin Sinfield, Lee Blackett's role is to develop the attack further using these skill sets, creating an attack that is highly skilled, can thrive in chaos and works best in unstructured situations. Now don't get me wrong, there is a structure and England will use it, but they will use it to unstructure the defence so that they can then play what's in front of them, and when they can do that, their skill sets will make them one hell of a team to live with. Now one headache that Steve will have is because of upskilling and the game that England play, selection is now dictated by so many factors. For example, the reverse DA and roaming winger dynamics mean players like Fraser Dingwall, Seb Atkinson, Ben Earl, Tom Willis and Chandler Cunningham South and Henry Pollock must be able to outcatch wingers under the high ball. This is also in addition to the brilliant basics that every player must master, not only generally as a rugby player, but their position-specific requirements. This mindset of striving for excellence and upskilling is a key reason why Steve and anyone watching as England fans should be excited about this England team. Now, hopefully today we've shown you the principles, shapes and structures of the England attack and how with a little bit more time it could be simply world-beating. However, it must be said that there's a lot more to this England team and a lot more we need to discuss. In the next video, we're going to look at England's set-piece attack, how it works both off scrum and line-out, and namely the principles involved in it. Then, in the third video, we're going to discuss the changes Byron McGuigan has made to Joe's defence, where he's changed it from a wide channel drift to a much higher line speed system reminiscent of the Stormers system taught to them by Felix. As this system is designed to force turnovers, we have to look at the turnover attack of England and how this came on leaps and bounds in Argentina. Here, we can see the keep ball alive principles and the skill sets of the England players which get the ball to space, resulting in a magnificent initial break and taking the ball up into the 22. These skill sets are down to Steve's ace up his sleeve, Andrew Strawbridge, the man behind England's creative passing and contact area. Now, we will also be taking a look at this, how he's worked very closely with Wigglesworth in attack to develop attack continuity, with skill sets in creative passing allowing England to thrive in chaos and making sure that they can finish attacks that they start in unstructured situations. When you put all of this together, it's easy to see why England are starting to look pretty promising. Now that the attack is starting to click, the last 4 performances in particular have been absolutely night and day different to what we've seen previously from England. And this is only going to improve. With the Lions coming back, the depth being built and the development and upskilling of this squad, we could see a legitimate contender at the 2027 World Cup. They've done this not with all-out attack, but by adding attack to the fundamentals of English rugby. If they can continue this development under Steve, England are going to achieve some great things.